Good afternoon, everybody. Quite a few familiar names that I recognise on the attendance sheet. And welcome to you if this is the first time that you've looked at a source webinar. You're very, very welcome. So first of all, just to make sure that you can hear me, I've disabled the chat because I want you guys to use the Q&A section if you've got any questions, which you're more than welcome to ask all the way through. So just to start off, if you could please go to the Q&A section, if you could tell me that, let me know that you can hear me, that would be fantastic. The reason that I'm asking, which is particularly pertinent for today, is that this is probably the first webinar that I'm doing that is outside of Sourced HQ. I'm actually sitting currently, you can probably hear that there's a slight echo. I'm sitting in a hotel meeting room somewhere in the Midlands in a beautiful old building. And that's where I'm broadcasting from today. So nobody's coming through in the Q&A. So that might be that you don't have a Q&A section. So let's see if I can remedy that. No. Okay, well, I can see that the microphone is recording on the left-hand side of the screen. So I'm going to assume that you can hear me. So I'm going to get started because this is recording anyway. So worst comes to the worst. If you can't hear me live, then you're going to hear me in the recording, and we'll send this video out to you. So yeah, we're talking about HMOs this afternoon. That's very exciting, isn't it? So let's get cracking without further ado. So what I'd like to ask you first of all, just so that I can gauge exactly who's listening to this, who is, and what your level of experience is, I'm going to ask if you can please complete this poll for me. So let me just get this poll live. So there should be a poll that appears on your screen right now. You can see that, and you can answer these questions. So the question is, what have you accomplished in property? So I want to find out what your level of experience is, because if you've got a decent level of experience, then I'm probably going to go into a bit more depth in some of the questions. But what I don't want to do is, if we've got a lot of people that don't have a huge amount of experience, I don't want to get too technical, because I could quite easily lose you. So I can see that the poll's been filled in, which I very much appreciate. Got just a couple more people to fill it in. I'll wait a second for you to have a look and read the answers, and then choose the most pertinent answer to yourself, and then we'll move on. Amazing. Everybody's filled it in. Thank you very much. Right. Okay. So I can see that we've got a good mix, actually, a good mix. So that makes it a little bit more challenging for me, because I need to keep it light, and I also need to go into a bit of detail, but I'm sure I can manage. So without further ado, let's go and have a look. So why are we talking about HMOs, and why specifically are we talking about HMOs now? Well, look, we're just to give you a little bit of an overview as to Source. We have 200 franchisees around the country, and what we do is we help and support them make money out of property, right? That's what we do. Now, as part of that package, as part of what we do to help them make money out of property, we look at market trends, and we look at data, and we tell them what we think is the right way to invest their money. The rest of the property world outside of Sourced has been going absolutely bananas for serviced accommodation for well, a good couple of years now. Certainly since COVID. But since then, we've been looking at the market in a slightly different way, because clearly there's been a lot of hype about serviced accommodation, but there's also been a lot of interest from the government about serviced accommodation, and that's coming to a head now. If you don't understand what serviced accommodation is, it's just another strategy. It's like an Airbnb strategy, although it's so much more if you go into the details of it. But lots of other people have been talking about serviced accommodation, and look, people have made a decent amount of money on serviced accommodation since COVID. But the way that we're looking at it, and the way that we're reading the data, is actually that isn't the only opportunity in the market right now. And while a lot of heads and a lot of eyes are on serviced accommodation, actually what you also need to consider are HMOs. HMOs are a phenomenal opportunity. And the reason for this is, like, property prices have gone up, right? We know that property prices have gone up. We've seen it. It's been well documented. Now they're starting to come down again, because the market's going through a small correction. But this is all driven, the property prices going up is driven by inflation, and it's the cost of living crisis has created this environment where property prices are expensive, the cost of living is expensive. And so for young people who are wanting to move home, or for young people who are wanting to start their career away from the family home, or leaving university, or any of those categories, where do they go? Well, we can see that the cost of property has gone up. And we can also see that the cost of living for these guys has also gone up. So what do they do exactly? Because they can't afford now to have a one-bed flat, or they can't afford to share a flat with somebody else. They have to, in order to move away, in order to get into their first job, they have to consider other alternatives. And a lot of these people have come from HMOs while they've been students. So then going from a student HMO into a higher end HMO is a real option for these guys. If they can see that they're making progress because now they're professionals rather than being students, then this is a real opportunity for these guys. And therefore, the demand on HMOs has risen dramatically since COVID and since property prices started going up. Now, the investor focus is on serviced accommodation, or the investor focus seems to be elsewhere. So therefore, right now, if you can get your hands on serviced accommodation, it's not only is there less competition out there for you, but it's a real opportunity. So what you're going to learn from this webinar is what makes HMOs attractive? Well, we've just gone through a little bit of that. How to source the best HMO opportunities. I'm going to give you insights into financing your HMO investments, because you've got more opportunity than just a residential mortgage for financing HMOs, but there are pros and cons to that, which we need to go through. Which HMO types you should focus on, how to unlock off-market deals, and then we're going to look at some success stories that we've helped support at Sourced. In fact, here's the first success story. So this is Gabe. Gabe joined us 2 years ago. When Gabe joined us, he had zero experience in property, absolutely none, but he knew that he wanted to get into property. And when Gabe first came to us, he'd done a little bit of research on HMOs, and he liked the model. He liked that he was going to own a property that was going to increase in capital value, and it was going to cash flow well for him. So from a base of absolute zero, we trained Gabe up on HMOs, and then our support team stood by his side while he found and assessed and converted the first HMO, and this was it. So it was valued at 135, but with our help, he purchased it for 112,500. Renovation works of 30, valuation £200,000. The gross rental £4,000, net income £2,000 a month. So this property sits there in Barrow for Gabe, and it makes him £2,000 per month. Now, since then, this was Gabe's first property that he bought with us a couple of years ago. Since then, Gabe has then added another 4 properties to his HMO portfolio. He now has 5 HMOs that are sitting there, very similar to this, in the background, cash flowing for him. And Gabe's only a young guy. I think he's in his early 30s, but he has achieved all of this thanks to following exactly what we're telling him to do, thanks to our training and our methods. And that's why we are the right people to be talking to you about HMOs today. So my name's Chris Kirkwood. I'm the Managing Director at Sourced. I founded, grown, and run multiple businesses across different business sectors, which have always ended up with a sale in that business. And I've exited those businesses, and then I went into property full time. And since I've been in property full time, I've been involved in deals from 50 grand to 150 million pounds. Lots and lots of different strategies, either or vicariously through helping other people put those strategies into practice. Essentially, what strategy it is doesn't matter, so long as you've got your research correct and you understand finance and contracts. And now what I do here as the managing director is I overview the strategy of the business, not just each of the property deals. So I look after the direction and the drive of the Source Group, and I help move us forward to create the most competitive package in property in the world. Here's another one, because HMOs take many, many shapes and sizes. So this was a care home. And this was bought by Jason. This was his second project that he did with this. The first one was the conversion of a commercial property into flats. This one was taking a care home and turning it into a 24-bed HMO. That's right, 24-bed. He bought it for 350. The renovation works for 350. The final valuation, 1.2 million. The net income that this property is generating is £6,000 per month. And not only could Jason, if he refinanced this, benefit from that, but also what Jason's done is he set up a letting agency on the back of this, and he's making money from the letting agency as well. And I don't know whether you can see from some of the pictures there, but the rooms are amazing. The rooms are all en suite, but he's got a cinema room in there. He's got a pool room. He's got the kitchens are phenomenal. It's a really, really well set up, very, very high end HMO. And again, going back to that, to the start of this, where we talked about where young people go when they're moving away from the family home or when they're leaving university, this is exactly the kind of thing that they're looking for. Those 24 bedrooms, they're already taken. It isn't an issue at all. The property was only ready about a month ago, and those bedrooms are already taken. So a phenomenal amount of demand because he's created the right thing in the right area with the right tenant type in mind. So going through those questions that we were talking about right at the very beginning, how to source the best HMO opportunities, and we're going to also look at unlocking off-market deals. A couple of things that you need to be aware of, right? What we like to do at Sourced is any strategy that we're teaching our franchisees, we always start with research, because our perspective on this is, if let's say that you're looking for HMOs and you've never come across HMOs before, I think it's a waste of everybody's time, especially your own, if you just start looking for HMOs and start talking to estate agents. And then you put a bit of time and effort into assessing the deal. And after, I don't know, half an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, it doesn't matter. But after some amount of time, you realize that fundamentally the deal doesn't work, because it might be in an Article 4 area. It might require a license. There might be a lease issue with the property that fundamentally means that property won't work as a HMO. Well, you've just wasted all of that time in finding that deal. So we start with research on every single strategy, because we want to make sure that when you actually put your time and effort into sourcing, you can make decisions quickly and efficiently, and you can progress that property purchase in an efficient manner, right? So there's a couple of things that you need to know for HMO. First of all, Article 4. If you go to a networking event and you talk to somebody about Article 4, I reckon about 95% of people will fundamentally misunderstand what Article 4 is. Most people will tell you that Article 4 means that you can't build a HMO in that area. Now, that might be true, so they might have stumbled upon some element of truth, but fundamentally it isn't correct. I'm going to go a bit technical here, so apologies if I lose anybody. So a normal residential home, the house that you live in, will most probably 99.9% of the time be a C3, a use class C3. So use classes are created by the planning department, so that and every property in the UK has a use class, and that determines what you're allowed to do with it. So a doctor's surgery will have a use class that determines that that can be a doctor's surgery. A shop has a use class that determines that it can be a shop. A restaurant similarly, and so on and so on. Your property that you live in is use class C3. Now, a HMO, if it's between normally, and there are differences to this, but normally if a HMO has between 3 and 6 people in it, then it will be use class C4. If it has more than 6 people in it, so 7 plus, it will be a different use class called sui generis. But a normal HMO between 3 and 6 people will be a use class C4, and that determines that it's a HMO. Now, to move from C3 to C4 would normally take a planning application. However, for HMOs, for that movement of C3 to C4, there's been a thing created by the government called a permitted development. You might have heard of these. A permitted development means that you're allowed to do something within the planning system that doesn't require full planning. You're allowed to do it without having to go through full planning. And moving a normal property from C3 to C4 is one of those things. So if you want to do that, you can do that and use the permitted development, which means that you don't have to go through full planning. In most cases, what you need to do is you need to tell the council that you're making that move. Okay. Now, some councils in some areas don't want you to do that. So if you've got too many HMOs in an area, the council might say, well, actually, I don't want you to do that, to use that permitted development. So what we're going to do is we're going to put an Article 4 restriction in place. And that Article 4 restriction removes that permitted development. So if you want to build a HMO in that area, you can't without having to go through full planning. And obviously, if you have to go through full planning, that's going to add time, that's going to add cost. And ultimately, it gives the council, the planning department of the council, control over whether you build that HMO there. So Article 4 is the removal of permitted development rights. Now, there's lots of different permitted developments that are out there. So you can go from, say, use class E to C3. You can build a small extension on the back of your house. And an Article 4 area can remove any of these permitted developments. And in fact, the Article 4 area is set up by the council, and they choose which permitted development it removes. So that means that there could be an Article 4 area set up in your town. It could be across the whole town, but it might refer to building extensions on the back of your house or replacing your windows. It might have nothing at all to do with HMOs. So where most people say that Article 4 means that you can't build HMOs in an area, they're right, as long as that Article 4 area specifically states that you can't turn a property from a C3 to a C4. If it mentions any of the other permitted developments, then you still can build a HMO in that area. So Article 4 is an important piece of legislation that you fundamentally need to understand if you're looking at creating HMOs in certain areas. The other thing that we need to consider is a license. So a license is set up for HMOs. It's specifically a HMO license. And a HMO license will be required if you've got between 4 and 6 people in your HMO. In fact, no, sorry, that's not true. I nearly got that wrong. A HMO license is required if you've got 4+ people in your HMO. So obviously, if your HMO is between 4 and 6 people, it will require a license and it will be use class C4. If your HMO's got 7+ people in it, it will require a license and it will be use class sui generis, for those of you that followed me with the technical stuff. The license requires you to hit a certain level of safety considerations within the HMO. For example, fire alarms, like linked fire alarms, fire doors, emergency lighting, certain numbers of plug sockets in bedrooms, certain numbers of cooking stations, depending on how many people are in the property, lots of different things. And ultimately what it boils down to is the license is trying to make sure that the fire safety of the HMO is up to scratch. Considering there are 6 people that live in that property, let's take 6 as the example, 6 people that live in that property that might never speak to each other. So it's just making sure that the fire safety is there. And it's absolutely, I think it's in terms of licenses and the breadth of property licenses, I actually think it's one of the good ones. It'll require you to spend £600, maybe £700, depending on your local authority on it. And that'll cover you for 3 to 5 years, again, depending on your local authority. But it is a good thing, and it protects you in case anything goes wrong with the property. The other thing that you need to be aware of is lease conditions. So if you've got a freehold house, then obviously you can make any decision as to what that house is used for within the use class limits. However, if you've got a freehold, if you've got a freehold house is what I just meant. If you've got a leasehold house, then you have to adhere to the conditions of the lease. And the conditions of the lease are put into place by the freeholder. So it might state that you can only use that property for C3 purposes, in which case converting it from a C3 to a C4 or from a C3 to a sui generis wouldn't be possible. So you just need to be aware that these things exist and these things are put in place, and they could just immediately mean that your deal doesn't work. So this is what I mean about finding a property, doing a load of due diligence, going on to Spare Room, finding all your comparables, working out how much it's gonna make for you, and then finding out there's an article 4 there, and you don't want to have to go through full planning, and ultimately the deal falls apart. You don't want that, so you need to make sure that you understand exactly what is required, and all the legislation surrounding HMOs before you get into it. So I hope Article 4 licenses, leases, I hope they help. So then when you've done your research and you understand exactly what all of these things are, what then? What do you target first? Well, essentially, you've got two different types of HMOs that you can target. You've got non-converted and you've got converted. So obviously, going back to those use classes that we were just talking about, if you're looking at non-converted, you're looking at C3 properties, you're looking at normal residential properties or potentially commercial properties that you want to turn into a HMO. And if you're looking at converted, then you're looking at properties that already exist as HMOs, and you're looking at some kind of niche or some kind of potential to add value to increase the value and make it worthwhile in your pocket to purchase them. Now, where are you going to find these opportunities? So for non-converted properties, you're going to look online. And look, 95% of properties that are sold in the UK are controlled by estate agents. And the vast majority of estate agents advertise on Rightmove. So Rightmove would be the logical place to start. So what are you looking for? Well, essentially, you're looking for largish properties that lend themselves to being converted into HMOs. So you're looking for properties that have got extra rooms downstairs, like a separate dining room, and that downstairs room you can turn into a bedroom to give you an additional bedroom to rent out to make that bedroom price that you're going to pocket. Now, these can be quite specific. What I found is as towns grow and expand, developers create pockets of properties, and each developer will have its own layout, its own scope, its own style of property that it creates to expand that town. For example, I was looking at HMOs or potential non-converted HMOs in Wilmslow, and there is one street on Wilmslow that I found where the 3-bedroom properties have a downstairs dining room, which lends itself to being converted into a downstairs bedroom, which would create a 4-bedroom HMO. And it just so happened in that area, it was very close to the train station, and the HMO room rent was very, very high. So that property lent itself to being converted into a HMO, which is what I did. Now, it worked there, but that was the only street on Wilmslow that it worked. So what did I do? I just used Rightmove in a normal way, and I set up an alert on that street. So as soon as any other property came for sale on that street, I got an alert, and I got that alert as soon as the property was listed. So I could potentially be the first person to be knocking on the agent's door to try and secure that property before anybody else did, because I had the numbers, I knew they worked. So the first thing is consistency. You need to make sure that you're consistent with your behavior and that you back up all the good information that you find. So for me, it was that street works. Set up an alert, just leave it. I don't then need to go back to Rightmove every couple of days or every week to check whether a new property has been listed in that street. Rightmove is doing the hard work for me. And the same anywhere else that I was looking. If I identified that there was a pocket like with a 4-bed that could be turned into a 5, or with a 5-bed that could be turned into a 6, because they were built the right size when they were originally built, then I set up an alert and I make sure that I am the first person to hear about it. So non-converted, looking online. So now non-converted direct to vendor. This is a potential for all of you social media users out there. So another property that I got hold of, which I converted into a HMO, was through direct to vendor. Now, all I did for this was build a social media presence. It really isn't as complicated as it seems. It's just all about consistency. Every now and then, I'd put out a load of content, I'd create value, and then every now and then I'd go out and say, look, if anybody needs any help with anything property-based, just give me a call. And because of this, one of my friends had a conversation with one of her friends who I didn't know, and they were talking about property, and her friend was lamenting about, the issues that she's having with property. And my friend thought, oh, I know Chris. Chris does property. Maybe he can help. And so she put us in touch, and I ended up arranging the purchase of that property to be converted into a 6-bedroom HMO with a phenomenal amount of cash flow coming out of it. So when you're looking for non-converted properties, you just want to be mindful of whether it can be used for HMO or not. And that's all about the space within the property. If you've got a 4-bed property, ideally you're looking to get 5 bedrooms out of it. If you've got a 5-bed, ideally you're looking to get 6 out of it. And obviously what you're looking for is an extra room down, at least one extra room downstairs that you can convert into a bedroom. You obviously also, as per our previous conversation, need to be mindful of how many people are in the house and the use class of that property. Because if you put 7 people in that house, then it falls into a different use class category, which we talked about earlier, called sui generis. Sui generis, to go from C3 or C4 to sui generis, requires full planning permission. So if you haven't gone through full planning permission and you put 7 people in that house, you're in breach of planning. And that can be a serious problem for you. So again, it's all about research. It's about knowing what you can do and knowing how to go about any changes that you're making to that property. Now looking at converted properties. So we're looking at HMOs that are already HMOs. Well, you can find these quite easily. You can go to, again, if you're looking on Rightmove, one of the things that you can do on Rightmove is use keywords. So in the top, just underneath all the search criteria, there's a keyword box. And you can write in that box, HMO, all one word, HMO, and then any property that is listed in wherever you're searching with HMO written in the description will be shown to you at the top of your search. So if you're looking for HMOs, that's a great place to start. Now, the issue with looking at HMOs that have already been converted into HMOs, and I pretty much guarantee, I reckon in about 85% of the time, what's happened and the reason that those HMOs are on the market is the landlord set them up about 5 years ago. The landlord has filled the HMO rooms, they've made a good profit, and gradually over time, the state of the property has deteriorated because, just normal wear and tear stuff, nothing sinister, just normal wear and tear. And then the landlord realizes after about 5 years that he should have been putting money away every month when the rent comes in order to prepare for this situation. But actually what the landlord's probably been doing is taking the money in and then spending it because he hasn't planned and he hasn't been thinking ahead. Now he's 5 years down the line. Now what does he do? Well, he's a little bit stuck, right? There's not much he can do because he doesn't have the money. He could take out a loan, but he might not want to do that. He might not have the rent to cover it. So therefore, the landlord puts it on the market and says, let's just sell it. Because you've got to bear in mind as well, as that property quality deteriorates, the tenants are probably getting worse as well. And that person is probably now a pissed off landlord. So they put it on the market and they look to sell it instead of refurbishing it and then getting it up to the same standards and the same margins and the same income levels as it was when he or she first set it up. So that's why most HMOs are on the market. Now, this is a tricky situation, right? Because that landlord knows how much money he can make from that property. So he's going to try and sell it for as much as possible, but also it needs a refurbishment. So therefore, it's going to require a bit of money from you to get it up to scratch. Now, in my opinion, what I really like doing when I'm looking at converted HMOs, especially on Rightmove, is this. This is a bit of a hack for you, right? So you find the converted HMO. You've probably got all the income figures there, which are probably the income figures when the property was first made, were first converted into a HMO. So let's say that all the properties on that street are worth 200K. But this landlord's been a bit cheeky because he knows that he can generate good income from it. So he only wants to let it go for 250K. But that one requires £50,000 worth of works to get it up to scratch again. So you're 300 grand all in if you buy the converted HMO. Well, what if you look at the other houses on that street? Because they're probably a similar layout, aren't they? So instead of buying that converted HMO with the inflated price, look at the other houses. Look next door. Look at the houses 2 doors down. If they're a similar layout, again, put that search alert on that street, because you've got the income figures there. So they've done the hard work for you. So now when a property comes up that isn't converted, but could be converted, it might still only take 50 grand in order to do that up. But now you're buying for 200 and you're going to pay 50 to do it up. So you're 250 all in instead of 300 all in. So that's a hack that I like looking at every single time that I find a converted HMO online. Always look next door. Always look if there's another opportunity that you can get yourself into very, very close by. And then going at converted properties direct to vendor. Well, there's a number of ways you can do this. Obviously, you can go into HMO groups that are online. You can find converted HMOs that are on Rightmove, and then you can contact the owners directly if the estate agent doesn't want to get in touch with you. Or another thing that you can do is a lot of converted HMOs don't sell when they're online. So make sure you keep a record of them, save them, because when they're removed from sale, they'll still show up in your saved searches, in your saved file on Rightmove. So you can see that the property is sold or it's been removed from the market. And when that happens, if it's just been removed from the market and it's not marked down as sold, you can then contact that vendor directly, because he's probably given up, he or she's probably given up on selling their property. So get in touch with them directly and see if there's some kind of creative deal that can be done for you to take over the ownership of that property. We once went to see a 110-bed HMO in Coventry, which isn't too far away from where I am actually today, but a 110-bed HMO in Coventry. And I was able to structure a way for the franchisee to buy that property without using any of their own money, by working with the vendor, by sitting down with the vendor in their office for about 2 hours, finding out as much as we possibly could about their situation, and then structuring the deal in a way where the franchisee could take it off their hands without using any of the franchisee's money. And the cash flow from that property is absolutely phenomenal. So it's all about sitting down and understanding their situation and then coming up with solutions to create a win-win-win solution. So how do you finance these little beauties? So when you're looking at property finance, you've got a couple of different options. You've got bridging finance, you've got peer-to-peer finance, which we have in-house sourced. You can use a mortgage, or you can use commercial finance. Now, in most residential stuff, over a long period of time, you're probably going to use a mortgage, and you can get a HMO mortgage. Typically, the HMO mortgages are about 1% higher than a standard residential mortgage, a homeowner's mortgage. So they're a bit more expensive. They're about 75% loan to value, but you can get HMO mortgages. Now, if you're going to do a big refurb and you've got a big uplift on the property, you probably want to buy it on a bridge first, do the refurb, then refinance onto a mortgage, because from a bridge or from peer-to-peer, you'll be able to, in 9 times out of 10, you'll be able to borrow more money than you can on a mortgage. For example, Source Capital could lend you up to 70% of the end value of your property. And that includes the purchase price, and it includes build costs as well. So you don't have to fork out everything that you need for the build cost from yourself. You are able to borrow that as part of that package. And then obviously you would refinance the property onto either a normal mortgage or a commercial mortgage, because over a long period of time, that's going to save you a huge amount of money, and it means you're making more profit month on month. But what exactly is the difference between a normal mortgage and a commercial mortgage? Well, that's a very good question. A normal mortgage is based on the bricks and mortar value of the property. So a surveyor will come around and they will give your property a value. A commercial mortgage is based on the income produced from that property. So let's have a look at 3 examples of commercial mortgages. So you could get a commercial finance, which is a multiple of the rent. So you calculate the gross rental income, and then you multiply that by a multiple. and that determines the value of the property. Now, the multiple is determined by the surveyor who comes around and views your property. And that multiple can be, is calculated by them based on what's the chance of replicating that property? Is it in an Article 4 area? How many bedrooms has it got? Is it significantly different from a normal residential property? What's the income generated from other properties around there? So they use all of these factors into consideration, and they'll use a specific multiple. Now, the highest multiple that I've ever seen was 12.5 times. But typically, and especially at the moment where surveyors are being a little bit more conservative, you're looking at 6 to 7 times. So they take the gross rental income, they multiply it by 6 or 7, and then that determines the value of that property. So that's a multiple of rent. They can use a yield-based calculation, and a yield-based calculation is based on the local yield. So the local yield, which they'll spend a couple of days putting this together, they put a huge amount of time and effort into creating these property valuations. The local yield is based on other operating HMOs and the yield that they're creating. They'll use that, and then they'll multiply your property by that yield. It's quite a complicated calculation. We've actually created a spreadsheet for our franchisees to use to make it a lot simpler for them to work out. But they use that calculation, and it's all based on the local yield. And then that gives your property a specific value. Or if they don't want to do those two, then a more conservative way that they can value the property is using bricks and mortar plus 30%. And that's a much more straightforward way. And in fact, that guy that was selling his HMO, because he hadn't pocketed he pocketed all the money instead of putting it aside for refurbishments. That's the standard way that they tend to value HMO. So they'll look at the bricks and mortar value, which in the case that we were using, it was 200 grand, wasn't it? And then he put it up to 250, which is a 25% increase in the bricks and mortar. But that's a standard way that people seem to value HMOs. It's a bricks and mortar plus a bit more because the property cash flows really, really competitively. So the pros of commercial finance are that you can release more money. You get a higher valuation, right? So you can release more money. And it can also be a faster way to get finance as well through commercial. Now, the cons absolutely have to be considered because they are significant. So the cons are you could end up with a dangerous level of debt, right? Let's say, for argument's sake, you've got a property, and that property on a bricks and mortar valuation is worth £250,000. Now, let's say on a commercial valuation, it's worth £500,000. And you can borrow 75% of that. So 75% of £500,000 is a lot more than £200,000. So what happens if you arrange commercial finance, you take out that level of debt on the property, but then your plans change and now you need to sell that property? And what if that's the only property in your portfolio? Well, that means that instantly, if you're going to sell that property quickly, you're probably in negative equity because you're probably only going to be able to sell it on a bricks and mortar valuation and not on a commercial finance valuation. Because to sell it on commercial finance, you've got to find somebody that's willing to pay that extra money when they can do what we said earlier. Instead of buying yours for 500, they can just buy the house next door for 200 and do it up into a HMO. And then they've got a cash flowing property similar to yours, but they paid a lot less money for it. So commercial finance for HMOs is something that's talked about quite a lot. I don't see anybody else talking about the dangers of commercial finance. Now, there's a time and a place for it. I'm not saying that commercial finance is always a bad idea. For your first property deal, it's probably not the best idea. However, if it's your 10th, your 15th, your 20th, and you've got a portfolio of normally mortgaged properties around it, and that provides your safety barrier, then I can understand why you would go for commercial finance. Because obviously, the higher the uplift, the more money you can release when you refinance, and that might put additional money in your pocket to go ahead and buy the next one. But it needs to be done in a sensible and realistic way, not just by building a portfolio of 10 or 15 HMO properties, all of which are commercially financed and all of which are leveraged above the bricks and mortar valuation. Again, we got a bit technical there, didn't we? So I hope you stayed with me on that. Which types of HMOs should you focus on? So you've got a number of different types. Everybody's heard of student HMOs. Then you've got benefits HMOs. You've got long lease HMOs. You've got contractors. You've got private, and then you've got high-end HMOs. So realistically, which one you're going to focus on depends on what you're trying to extract. Like, you're interested in HMOs, therefore what you want to do is build a portfolio and cash flow that portfolio as much as you possibly can. But how much time and effort you put into this, and whether you're going to manage it yourself or whether you're going to use an agent to manage it, determines which one of these you go for. So if you want to manage it yourself, but you don't want a huge amount of activity, or you don't want to be doing viewings all the time, you might go for a student HMO because you've only got to fill that house once every year. Now, there's pros and cons to that. What a lot of institutional money is going towards building big blocks of HMOs for students, because the institutional money realizes that as quite a stable income source. So what you could do is you could buy a couple of HMOs in a town, and then institutional money comes into that town, builds a big block, which is, you know, got cinemas, got super fast Wi-Fi, got really state-of-the-art rooms, and then no students want to use the existing HMOs anymore. That's happened in quite a lot of places, and it's either forced landlords to go down a different route or just shut up shop completely. You go after benefits HMOs, and that would usually mean you're handing it over to a local authority, or you're going to accept universal credit people. Now, again, pros and cons. That might be something that you want to do because you want to help out people that are on benefits, or you want to create nice environments for people that are on benefits. And I know it's not as easy as it used to be, but you can still get that universal credit paid directly to you. I've got a guy on my staff who is the head of support, and he still does that with universal credit, and he's got somewhere around 300 properties with a huge volume of them being HMOs. You could go after long lease properties from companies, for example, Serco, or housing associations. Each one of them will have different requirements, and what you would need to do is get in touch with them to find out what their requirements are before you set up that HMO and hand it over to them. But they can take HMOs for up to 10 years. And some of them will do them on FRI leases, which are fully repairing and insuring. So they'll give you HMO back after 10 years, after paying your rent for 10 years, no void periods, no commission, just solid tenancy income. And they'll repair anything that needs repairing, and they'll insure the property as well if anything goes wrong with it. So very, very, very low cost, low input for you. You can put contractors or private, similar sort of tenants, similar sort of levels of activity required from you if you want to take over one of those HMOs. You're just going to set them up differently. I had a HMO once where the the carpet inside the front door was quite a light carpet, and whenever contractors came round to have a look at the HMO, they would look in and go, "Oh no, sorry, I can't live there." They turn around and they walk away without even viewing the inside, and it was a beautiful house. And I used to think to myself, what the hell is going on here? But it makes obvious sense that these contractors are going to come home from work, and they're probably going to be, you know, a bit dirty, or certainly the guys that turned around were going to be a bit dirty. And they didn't want to destroy the carpet because it was a light colored carpet, because they wanted to get their deposit back. Totally logical. So if you're going to set up HMOs for contractors, you're probably going to put hard flooring down. You're just going to be a bit mindful of the type of property that they want to live in, considering they want to get their deposit back. Private and high end, you know, you're creating a higher end product. You're creating a much nicer product, especially if these guys have previously been to university and had a student HMO. I can't speak for everybody, but the student HMOs that I lived in were disgusting. And when I first came out of being a student, I really didn't want to experience that kind of environment again. Had I moved into a HMO because I was moving away from the family home, I would have wanted something that represented my my step up the career ladder. The really high end stuff, like the one that I just showed you at Hadley House, you know, cinema rooms, libraries, pool tables, all of that kind of stuff. It's all about the numbers. If the numbers work, then all of this additional stuff is just going to make sure that you've got a much more competitive occupancy in order to take advantage of those numbers more consistently. So I've now got another poll for you. So what I want to understand is what is holding you back. So what is holding you back from achieving your property goals? What exactly is it? If you can have a look we've got education, we've got confidence, we've got finding the right deals, we've got funding. So if you can fill this in and let me know, I would be very, very interested. So, wow, that's really interesting. In most cases, we've got answers for every single one now. So much appreciated. So we've got funding, we've got finding the right property deals, we've got confidence, and we've got education. That's brilliant. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. I will end the poll now. Education's an interesting one when it comes to HMOs, because there are some nuances and there are some niches to HMOs that you absolutely have to understand in order to make good decisions. And a similar number of people have put confidence to put in education. It's the same thing. It's understanding, because if you understand all the things that you need to understand, then you've got that confidence to move forward, knowing that you're making good decisions. Finding the right property deals, man alive. Quite a lot of people have put this one. Finding the right deals at the minute, I mean, it's a tricky situation, isn't it? I think this is the best time to find property deals for 10 years, something like that. If you've got the right mindset to it. If you look at the overall housing market and you look at the situation, there are a lot of sellers that are out there trying to sell their properties. There are not many buyers because of the cost of funding. So if you've got access to funding and levels of funding that have been there since pre-COVID, because what a lot of lenders have done is, instead of offering you like an 80% mortgage, you can now only get a 70% mortgage. Because just after COVID and just before COVID, we went up to 100% mortgages again. But that's been taken off the market now. That's not available because lenders are worried that if they offer 100% mortgages, then the affordability just isn't there. Now, if you can find funding that covers that, then you've just solved your problem, because I guarantee the deals that you're seeing out there, if you put in 10 offers every week, some of those deals are going, 9 out of 10 of them might say no because of the level of the purchase price that you're suggesting. But there are very, very, very motivated sellers out there right now, because there's lots of sellers, but there aren't many buyers. And fundamentally, that means that for the people that have to sell, that drives them to a more desperate situation where they'll accept lower offers. That is the situation that we're in right now. So finding the right deals is purely about volume at the moment. You find enough deals that work, you put in enough offers, you will find the deals. You then get onto the issue of funding, and how do you achieve the funding? Well, the funding can be achieved so long as you know the right funders. And, to be brutally honest, we know the right funders because we are the right funder. And for our franchisees, we offer them up to 100% funding of the purchase price and the build costs for exactly the same rate as before COVID. We haven't put our rates up, even though the interest rates have gone up. So it's all about finding the right people. And let's have a look at some of the stuff that we've helped people do. So this is Shahid. I'll just whip through these pretty quickly because we've been at this for about 50 minutes now. This is Shahid. We've helped him build his cash flow. So all he focuses on is cash flow. He sold 22 deals in 48 hours. He normally sells about 20 deals per month. Again, creating cash flow. This is Sav. These guys have got very different strategies to HMO. These guys are just creating cash flow. Trevor and Greg, they're netting £160,000 per month. And now we get onto the property projects themselves. This is Phil. Phil did a flip up in Scotland, made £40,000 profit. He got 100% funding of the purchase price and the build costs for that project. This is Jamie. This is Jamie's first project. Jamie's now on his fourth project. His first project was a 4-bed house. Now Jamie's building an estate of houses because we've helped him level up and level up and level up. This is Chris converting an office building into 14 apartments. First ever property deal, circa £1 million worth of profit. And then we're on to Nigel. Nigel, this is a HMO. Nigel, I know from the top of my head that Nigel needed £200,000 to purchase this property, and he needed £220,000 to refurbish this property. And he borrowed all of that money from Source, all of the purchase price, all of the refurb cost. He has taken the advice of getting a long lease on this, and so he now rents that out to the NHS. He has absolutely nothing to do with that property on a month-to-month basis, apart from taking in the income. Nigel's now on another deal that he's getting funded by us, and he's got about £9 million worth of deals in his pipeline that he wants to get funding in very similar situations. The bog standard property, it just so happens to work when you add an extra bedroom and you work out the income. It works, and it's been cash flowing for Nigel for quite a while now. So how do we help these guys? What exactly do we do? So I think you can see my mouse, so I'll point at things. If you're looking for training, if you're looking for education, you can get that from a trainer. You can even get support from a trainer, but that support from a trainer tends to be like one phone call once a month. If you're looking for unlimited support, you can get a mentor. Mentors cost about 500 quid a month. If you want training and you want support from a trainer, we know some of our competitors in the market charge about 25 grand per annum for that kind of privilege. If you want lead generation, you can get lead generation for about 50 quid per lead, be they investor leads or property leads. You want to sell your deal, you can go to an agent and you're going to pay 1%. What we've done for our franchisees is we've set up our Source Property app. It's the Source Property Investment app. Deals are on there, specifically investment deals, including HMO, are on that app every day. If you want to find the next deal and you're struggling to find a deal, then make sure you download the Source Property Investment app. Set your criteria to HMO and you'll be alerted whenever a new HMO is found by one of our franchisees and put onto the app to sell to investors, and that investor could be you. If you want lending, if you want funding, you can go to a lender, and that lender's typically at the moment, especially, going to give you a low loan to value. They're not interested in lending you the maximum amount of money that they can lend you because of the state of the market at the moment. If you want a JV partner, again, you can go and find a JV partner, but they're going to want a big amount of money from the property that you're creating. Here at Source, we provide all of those things. We do everything. It's all part of the package that we offer to our franchisees. And the cost for that package is $12,999 plus VAT, and that's for 5 years. That's not renewed every year, that's for 5 years. Plus £245 plus VAT per month. That is it to get access to all of those things. Training, and the training doesn't just cover HMO, it covers a number of different strategies. So if you're looking at HMO to build your cash flow, and then you're looking at moving on to commercial conversions or building estates of houses like Jamie that I just showed you, you can absolutely do that. And all the training that you'll need to achieve that is included in that price. Really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope the audio's been okay. The Wi-Fi is a little bit shaky in this hotel. If you're interested in taking this conversation further, then please either scan the QR code or email us at franchise@source.co, and we can have a conversation about how we can help you move your property investing forward. We can help you supercharge your property investing so that you can achieve more as part of a group of over 200 individuals than you possibly can on your own. So it's been a delight to speak to you this afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. If you've got any questions, please feel free to come back to us at franchise@source.co or scan that QR code to book in with Sam. And I really appreciate your time. Thanks very much. I'll leave you to your afternoon, and good luck with everything that you do within property. Thanks very much.